Good afternoon. It's Friday the 27th of October 2023, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Mike Robinson. Joining me in the studio today is Brian Gerrish. And by video link, we have Vanessa Beeley. We're going to get started today with the online safety bill. It is no longer a bill. It is now an act. It became law yesterday. Let's just have a very brief look at what the government is saying about it. This is going to make sure that illegal content is removed. And this is the only positive out of this whole thing. Because the fact that the government was forced to drop the harmful but legal aspect of this was a positive development. It's going to enforce the promises social media platforms make to users when they sign up through terms and conditions, and this is the key point. So instead of the government aiming to work out what is legal content which is harmful that they want to ban, they're basically going to require Ofcom to hassle social media platforms to make sure that the terms and conditions are followed to the letter. They are going to offer users the options to filter out content such as online abuse that they don't want to see. Well, if it was only online abuse, that might be a positive development. But of course, this is not about online abuse or child protection or terrorism content. It's about censorship. And we will maintain that analysis. So Ofcom has been made the regulator, of course, and let's just see what they had to say about this. They are going to take this responsibility as the new regulator in three main phases. So phase one, they're saying they're going to publish draft codes and guidance on their duties on the 9th of November 2023. Including analysis of the cause and impacts of online harm to support services in carrying out the risk assessments, because there's a whole regulatory burden that now goes on to the various platforms. They're going to provide draft guidance on recommended processes for assessing risk. They're going to create draft codes of practice, setting out what services can do to mitigate the risk of harm. And they're going to set out draft guidelines on Ofcom's approach to enforcement. They're going to run a consultation on those guidelines, and the codes of practice will then be submitted to the Secretary of State for Science, Innovation and Technology, and subject to the approval there laid before Parliament. So there is going to be parliamentary oversight of this. There's still plenty of opportunity to get involved in that process. Phase two involves child safety, pornography, and the protection of women and girls. And they're saying that they are going to focus on regulated services and other interested stakeholders who will be able to read and respond to draft codes of practice related to the protection of children. And that's going to be in the spring of 2024. They're also going to consult on the analysis and causes of impacts of online harm to children, and they're going to create a draft risk assessment guidance for focusing on children's harms and so on. And then finally, phase three is about transparency, user empowerment, and other duties on categorized services. So that they're going to require companies to provide transparency reports, and this is all about how they manage their censorship regimes, how they actually adhere to their terms and conditions. So they're required to provide transparency reports that's going to provide, as they say, user empowerment tools, and they're going to enforce this operation in line with terms of service. The other aspect of phase three is the protection of certain types of journalistic content, because if, as a media organization, any media organization wants to sign up to this regulatory regime, they can do so. And then they may find that some of their content is protected, and social media companies, no matter what it says in terms and conditions and so on, will not be able to remove that content. This, of course, is all about making sure that the regulated narrative is protected, and that may be viewed as being the government narrative. So here is Dame Melanie Dawes, the chair of Ofcom. Ofcom is not a censor, she says, and our new powers are not about taking content down. Well, of course, Ofcom is not the censor. The censor is the platforms. The censor is the Googles, the Facebooks, the Twitters of the world. Ofcom is merely making sure that they pursue their censorship requirement as regular. That's the platform censorship requirement as rigorously as possible. So they say our job is to tackle the root causes of harm. How are they going to do that? Are they going to provide all kinds of societal change, which is going to deal with the root causes of harm?
Are they going to tackle the criminal element which is producing the harm? No, they're not. And particularly where there's a lot of money to be made out of it, it's going to continue.
Indeed. So let's bring this on, because, of course, we're talking about transparency. reports, they are going to be required to issue transparency notices. So if they feel that a particular organization is not fulfilling their transparency requirements, they'll be in receipt of a transparency notice, and they'll then have to do certain things to resolve that. But I just was amused at this press release from Ofcom in February this year, talking about how they had been signing up surreptitiously, anonymously, not as Ofcom, to various platforms in order to establish what the user experience is like, with a view to informing how they enforce these transparency platforms. And of course, the other aspect that I haven't mentioned so far is the effect on end-to-end encryption. And just a quick reminder that, of course, the consultation which closed in July on the revised Investigatory Powers Act notices regime, well, we haven't had a feedback from that yet, but of course this is all about various other types of notices about making sure the government can get access to encrypted chats and so on whenever the government makes a notice. But the key point, as I'll just remind everybody, is that if they have issued a notice to, say, for example, get some information about who Brian Gerrish was speaking to at a particular time and what he might have been saying, they're not allowed to inform Brian that they've been in receipt of that notice. So the process of online safety and censorship begins now.
And let's come in at a slightly different angle. This article from The Guardian caught my eye. It's labelled Opinion BBC. The furore over the BBC's Israel-Gaza coverage shows how strong and independent it needs to be. Starving the corporation of funds has been an act of national self-harm. We can make it fit to fight digital disinformation. So the gentleman in the picture, Pat Young, chairs the British Broadcasting Challenge, which promotes discussion about UK public service broadcasting. So I was fascinated with this article and I delved into it. One of the key images that comes up is the one you can see, which they had labelled pro-Palestinian demonstrators throw paint over the BBC building. But let's get into the meat of it very quickly. It says the BBC operates under the most intense scrutiny of any media organisation in the world, and this has never been more apparent than over recent days as the world comes to terms with an unimaginable massacre in Israel and the aftermath in Gaza. Interesting language there by The Guardian, of course. A number of politicians and media outlets, most with not well-hidden agendas, have chosen to see the BBC as the issue on which to concentrate. They're right. Well, we're absolutely right. So it goes on to say the BBC is the issue because a strong, well-funded and editorial independent BBC has never been more important for an informed democracy than it is today. But the government's been stripping away funds. People have been questioning its impartiality, quite rightly. And so now we find ourselves with 30% cuts to the BBC budgets. And oh dear, there's woe. But what is this British Broadcasting Challenge that this gentleman is involved in? Well, this is where it gets really interesting, because here it is. And it's got two simple goals: to promote a wide-ranging discussion about the future of UK public service broadcasting, its potential for good, its ability to transmit truth, its institutional place at the heart of the UK, and how it can be improved for the digital age. And they want that debate in public. Well, at least that second point is of interest. But if we get into a little bit more detail about them, they say, we know facts matter, we know accountability matters, we know identity matters, we believe that how these values are transmitted matters. And then it goes on to say we're very lucky in the UK because we've got the publicly owned BBC, Channel 4, S4C, with agreed content commitments from ITV, Channel 5, Scottish Television, Ulster Television, as well as obligations on all licensed broadcasters. This ecosystem works to ensure fairness, impartiality, through its uniquely British construction, whatever that means. It covers commitments, content, arts and religions, portrayal of the nations and regions. And then by the time you get to the bottom, it's also pointing out that there's 118 billion circulating, which it says is added value to UK PLC. A lot of questions to be asked about that. And if I do this second bit very quickly here, it says that They're worried because in a fast-changing media landscape, our unique ecosystem is under threat, under funding from the proliferation of unregulated broadcasters online. This is where the fear is coming from, and from the exponential growth of social media platforms, from US-based streaming services shorn of any public service broadcasting obligations, from changes driven by ideology over evidence, and even from benign neglect. So it's all woe, but what are they really frightened about? Social media coming online. But they ask this question. They say, if the government has got a deliberation going on about the future of public service broadcasting, shouldn't this be available to the public? So I'm going to go with them on this point, although clearly they're in defence of the whole system in itself. And if I come to the Public Service Broadcasting Advisory Panel, which was set up here, we're talking 2020. Let's bring in a headline. Membership of the advisory panel is voluntary. An invitation from the Secretary of State, Culture, Media and Sport, and or the Minister of State for Media and Data, who will chair the panel. So it's clearly independent, Mike, as you can see. And it goes on to talk about its role and purpose. So whether the concept of public servicing broadcast is still valid, how it should conduct its affairs, how it should be regulated. But then my eye was cast to the selected people. And we've got senior advisor at BT, we've got Liberty Global, we've got Lord Grade, former chief executive of Channel 4, chairman of the BBC Board of Governors and executive chairman of ITV PLC. They're all completely independent still. And then we drop down through this selection, which I'd encourage people to look. And this one caught my eye, Sophie Turner-Lang, former CEO of Endemol Shine Group. Now, I have never heard of Endemol Shine Group, so I did a little bit of work on that. And here is a takeover of Endemol, which means that it's now the largest international content producer and distributor, 88,000 hours of multi-genre premium entertainment, most of which I've seen is very dark. And you're talking about 2.7 billion. So this is the powerhouse that's working behind closed doors with the government to talk about the future of public service broadcasting. And I think there's a lot of questions to be asked as to how this little arrangement is working.
Okay, let's move over to Vanessa then. Welcome to the program, Vanessa. Let's head for Israel and Gaza.
Yes. So first of all, I wanted to draw attention to a statement made by President Biden in light of the soaring Gaza death toll. This is an article in The Cradle written by the News Desk, calls the deaths of innocents a price to pay. So let's see what he's actually referring to. He basically is very disparaging about the figures being put out by the health ministry in Gaza, despite the fact that traditionally Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, UN agencies have always relied on those figures and found them to be historically very accurate. So he says, I'm sure innocents have been killed, and it's the price of waging a war. So it appears to put no responsibility on Israel for effectively the massacre that is going on inside the Gaza concentration camp. Reminds me a little bit, not totally similar context, but to Madeleine Albright, who over the death of 500,000 dead Iraqi children said that it was a very hard choice, but the price, we think the price is worth it. As I said, not entirely similar context, but it just reminded me of that. So in response, the Palestinian Ministry of Health has now published a 212-page report, which is available online, including all details, names, family names, etc., of more than, I think we're now at 7,500 killed in Gaza that are currently being buried in mass graves, and their bodies are being held in converted poultry trucks and ice cream trucks. 3,000 children, just please let that sink in. How many schools in the UK would that involve of children? Then I want to focus on the continued dehumanization campaign, particularly by members of the Zionist government or with connection to the government. This is from Dan Gilliman, former UN ambassador of Israel 2003 to 2008. Interestingly, he's also a senior advisor to the Blackstone Group and CEO or chairman of the Blackstone Group Israel. So let's roll that, Mike.
Just want to ask you then about something else he said in his speech, which is about the collective punishment, as he put it, of the Palestinian people. And I want to talk about that in the context of the blockade and keeping fuel out of Gaza. I just wonder if you think that that is really necessary.
You know, I'm very puzzled by the constant concern which the world and also Britain, I must say, Mark, is showing for the Palestinian people, and is actually showing for these horrible, inhuman animals who have done the worst atrocities that this century has seen, and the worst atrocities that Jews have suffered since the Holocaust.
Interesting language being deployed there. And then we have James Woods, who I believe was the executive producer on the film Oppenheimer, who tweeted out, and I have to say, although X, as it's currently called, may have limited visibility, there has been no action against this, which is clearly hate speech on the par, for me, with the hate speech and dehumanization rhetoric that the Nazis deployed against the Jews. So he says, bomb the savages who did this back to the Stone Age. There are no gray areas. Kill them all, every Hamas savage and every Hamas supporter on earth. Bury them with the entrails of pigs. Just to clarify, that Gazan civilians have been putting out very regular announcements that they stand by the resistance factions and that they're not going to be driven out of Gaza. Next, I want to show a very short clip of an interview, again by Sky News, with an IDF commander, which is quite extraordinary.
Now, on the bombardment of Gaza, it's causing a death toll that is surpassing anything in the decades-long Israel-Palestine conflict. What percentage of the something like 700 deaths a day that are being reported from Gaza, what percentage are Hamas terrorists?
Mark, we are not bombarding Gaza.
Oh, you can watch the full section of that interview. It's available pretty much everywhere on social media. But interesting that Max Blumenthal then tweeted out following Netanyahu's address amid the war with the Palestinian resistance factions. Netanyahu, the leader of Israel's master race democracy, this is Max's terminology, declares, "We are the people of the light." They, presumably meaning the Palestinians, are the people of darkness. Then vows to fulfill biblical prophecy, which is based on the apocalypse, through the bombardment of Gaza. Personally, I've been calling it the Hiroshima doctrine. In the last 19 days, Israel has dropped more than 12,000 tons of explosives, which is equivalent, according to many, of the Hiroshima atomic bomb. And here is just a few seconds of what that looks like for Palestinians. Then moving on, Israel's ambassador to the UN, Gilad Erdan, who, by the way, when he stepped up to speak at the UNGA, many diplomats walked out in protest from the meeting. So here he states, this was, I think, on the 18th of October, Israel has a right to self-defense, so we're back onto self-defense. Hamas is solely responsible for the Palestinian situation in Gaza and is committing crimes against humanity. We'll come on to that. In the wake of the Holocaust, we collectively swore never again, so we have reference to the Holocaust again. This is one of the main reasons the UN was established. Never again, dear colleagues. Of course, within 3 years of the end of the Second World War, the Zionists were carrying out another ethnic cleansing against Palestinians, which is being denied, of course, by Zionists and their supporters. And following on from this self-defense trope that is rolled out by Israeli spokespeople. I want to play this video recent by Gideon Levy, a journalist for Haaretz. He's a Jew, and here he's speaking about the Israeli state.
I know many occupations which were longer than Israeli occupation, than the Israeli occupation. Some were even more brutal, even though it's getting harder and harder to be more brutal than the Israeli occupation. I don't recall one occupation in which the occupier present himself as the victim. Not only the victim, the only victim. If to quote here the late Golda Meir, she once said that we will never forgive the Arabs for forcing us to kill their children. We are the victims. We are forced to kill their children. Poor us. And as the victim and the only victim in history, again, it enables us the rights to do whatever we want, and nobody is going to tell us what to do, because we are the only victims. To this, there is a third very deep-rooted value, and this is the very deep belief, again, everyone will deny it, but if you scratch under the skin of almost every Israeli, you'll find it there. The Palestinians are not equal human beings like us.
Then what I want to very quickly look at, because I can see that I'm running out of time. The IOF is still claiming, of course, that it was a Palestinian resistance failed missile that caused the Gaza hospital blast at the Baptist Hospital. However, even New York Times is putting out a report saying that it has evidence that that is not necessarily plausible. Moving on, Mike, to the next article, to the Mondo Vice article, because I'll just rush through these a little bit. People can read the articles for themselves. So this is a Mondo Vice article that was put out quite recently in the last couple of days. A growing number of reports indicate Israeli forces were responsible for Israeli civilian and military deaths following October 7th attack. Please do read these accounts that I'm going to be showing you. So basically, I'll go through very quickly. This is testimony from a local resident whose partner was killed, who talks about on the Monday, 2 days after the original attack, on the Monday, Israeli tanks carried out the shelling of buildings that contained not only armed resistance factions, but also civilians. So they effectively killed a number of civilians. And then moving on to the recent release of hostages taken by the resistance factions. This is Yocheved Lifshit's statement that caused great perturbation amongst the Zionist media and PR moguls in Israel, if we can see what they actually said. Because basically Lifshitz was saying that they were treated extremely well by the resistance factions. And in fact, the footage of her leaving shows her shaking the hand of one of her captors. A source who's involved in Israel's wartime public diplomacy basically stated that allowing Lifshitz to speak publicly with her daughter translating into English had harmed Israeli Hasbara public diplomacy, basically supporting Israeli political agenda. Two other articles that I recommend that basically bring together all of the alleged atrocities and break them down and demonstrate that actually many of them were based on unverified, unsubstantiated reports and should be either retracted or qualified post the event. So we're seeing again the rush to judgment, the claim of atrocities is now being severely watered down by good investigative journalism. So you have this article from The Cradle, and then last from Mint Press News, how big media facilitates Israeli war crimes in Gaza. I do recommend people read both of those.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much for that, Vanessa. Let's move on. We'll come back to this topic a little later, but let's move on with this. Yesterday, Rishi Sunak was describing the future for us in the UK and the world, in fact, with respect to artificial intelligence. He's saying that AI has the potential to transform society, but it brings new dangers and fears. So this speech that he gave yesterday was really a precursor to the AI Safety Summit, which is going to be hosted by the UK on the 1st and 2nd of November. And this, of course, is coming under the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology. One of the key objectives of the AI Safety Summit, they say, is this is the first ever summit to discuss AI safety, is to come to a shared understanding on the emerging risks, which can then inform how nations manage them. So let's just look at some of the things that he said in his speech. The British people should have peace of mind that we're developing the most advanced protections for AI in any country in the world. So how are they going to do that? Let's have a guess. Well, they're going to do that by removing all the regulation. They're going to stop the regulation because regulation stops innovation, and therefore they've got to stop the regulation. They're just going to let people do whatever they like. This is a point of principle. We believe in innovation. It's a hallmark of British economy. So we will always have a presumption to encourage it, not stifle it. Instead, we're building world-leading capability to understand and evaluate the safety of AI models within government, because government has demonstrated, particularly in the last 2 or 3 years, how well it copes with models, of computer models, whether they described as AI or not, particularly with respect to, for example, public health. So they demonstrated how capable government is with modeling, and this is now going to be rolled out to AI. And so just to look at what they're actually doing here, they are now shutting down some of the regulatory bodies that they've already established on this. So this is the Advisory Board for the Centre of Data Ethics and Innovation. This publication has been withdrawn on the 12th of September 2023. The content is no longer current. The Centre for Data Ethics and Innovation Advisory Board closed on the 9th of September 2023. So they're taking away all the sort of oversight that was there for AI already. And then we have the Data Protection and Digital Information Bill that's currently being looked at through Parliament, or going through Parliament at the moment. And it's going to see the role of the Information Commissioner replaced with an Information Commission. So they're going to keep the name more or less the same, but the role is going to be very different, and it's going to have a lot less oversight and regulatory oversight on what's going on. So here is Professor Fraser Sampson, the Surveillance Camera Commissioner. The loss of regulation and oversight in this key area comes just as the evolution of AI-driven biometric surveillance makes it more important than ever. But don't worry, this is going to be the safest place on earth for...
Not.
Yes.
Or not.
Okay, if you like what the UK Column is doing, you'd like to support us, please head over to community.ukcolumn.org. Join us there, become a member. This is how we exist, and your help very much appreciated. You could pick something up on the UK Column shop, and well, it's nearly coming to Christmas again, and so the gift cards are available if you would like to grab one. For anybody waiting for an MHRA t-shirt, those will be with us on Monday, so they'll be shipped out next week. You shouldn't have to wait for very much longer.
We just add to that, Mike, it is this tremendous support by our subscribers and people who donate to the column that have allowed us to start to expand what we're doing. We want more content. We want more people presenting. We want more investigation. And all of this is possible with your support. And ultimately, if you can bring in more subscribers, this makes everything possible. So, yeah.
Yep, but you can also help by sharing material. So ukcolumn.org, especially ukcolumnextracts.co.uk. Now we have got a bit of a correction. Now, NewsGuard says we don't make corrections, but we have a bit of correction to make.
Well, it's a very important one. And of course, I am at fault because I'm going to call it a typo, but I was reporting on the fact that either Keir Starmer had got two opposing ideas in his head, or a lot of people suggested he was lying. Well, I couldn't confirm or deny that. But apparently the key thing that I got wrong was that I made a mistake with his name, which should have been Keir, and I put it More Construction Company, Keir. I-E-R. So there we are. There's a correction by UK Column, and we do apologise to Mr. Starmer that we got his name wrong. Now, on much more important issues, we would like to thank a viewer who pointed this Telegraph headline out to us. Care home residents left to starve in pandemic. The COVID inquiry is told. Scottish bereavement groups give evidence about how their loved ones were neglected. Now, of course, this is behind the Telegraph's paywall, but this is the caption. Care home residents may have been neglected and left to starve during the pandemic. Lawyers representing bereaved relatives have told Scotland's COVID inquiry. We hope to have a lot more information for viewers about this, and stay posted, because what a horrific time that was when we allowed our elderly relatives to suffer under the brutality of lockdown. Now, if you think that's bad enough, let's have a little look at how the police are operating in UK in 2023. And another big thank you to a viewer who pointed this clip out to us.
Sylvia, just do what Lee said, just go peaceably, he's on his way. He's going to come and meet you. Just go peaceably.
I need my keys.
Got your keys, got your shoes, and got a coat.
Do you know where her medication's kept?
I've just had a look, I don't know. She keeps all her stuff put away appropriately.
That's right, this police response is for criminal damage because a 67-year-old lady has pruned a hedge or an overgrown tree or shrub in her communal garden.
I'll get you some water.
Yeah.
All covered. You alright, buddy?
I'm fine.
Yeah?
I'm fine. Are you?
Yeah, oh, better days.
You just made an illegal arrest there.
Oh, I didn't.
You did. You did, because she's got a letter from the landlord saying she's got access to the garden. It's a communal garden and she can move twigs, yeah?
Well done.
So, what's your badge number? You're bullies, you're fascists, yeah? There's not crime going on like rape, murder. You're going to be held accountable for this. Yeah, you can wave all you like. Illegal arrest, mate. Illegal arrest. Well done. Your mother must be proud of you.
Right, here are some stills from the original Facebook post. You can pause and read if you'd like, but what I would suggest is go in the description, hit the link, and go to the original Facebook post and show support to Ria and Sylvia that way. Long story short.
So there we are, an extremely poignant bit of film, but what does it really show? The disgraceful state of Britain's police at the moment. Of course, the male taking control of the situation has got to be that powerfully built man, because an old lady is on the floor and she's been cutting twigs. The brutality of it, the callousness of it, absolutely no engagement with that elderly lady at all. She's carted off. This is the state of UK in 2023. We are standing on the international platform to lecture other countries as to how they should be conducting their society. It is appalling, and the police need to be held to account over this.
Okay, let's move back to the Middle East, well, at least the United Nations Security Council. Now, we were talking about on Wednesday about the recent efforts to call for a ceasefire through the Security Council, which failed because of a veto from the United States. Two more attempts have been made at this in the last couple of days, both on Wednesday. One was from the US, a draft resolution from them, and also one from Russia and the UAE from Russia, I believe. But anyway, both votes were failed. And I'm going to start here with Vanessa sort of showing a little bit of the clip from this, a little bit of the speech from this. But I just wanted to show the comments from the Israeli permanent representative Gilad Erdan on, or at least a couple of them, on this. Let's have a listen.
You would feel that there is a blatant double standard and that the international community is blind to your agony and that the Council isn't taking even the most basic steps that anyone with a slight moral compass should take. This is precisely how the state of Israel feels right now. Those who have voted against the US-led resolution have shown the world that this Council is incapable of doing the most basic task of condemning ISIS-like terrorists and cannot confirm the right to self-defense of the victim of these heinous crimes. Hamas has perpetrated the most barbaric massacre of Jews since the Holocaust. Hamas is solely responsible for the Palestinians' situation in Gaza. Hamas is committing crimes against humanity. In the wake of the Holocaust, we collectively swore never again. This was one of the main reasons the UN was established. Never again, dear colleagues, is now. Do not forget this.
So that's the position of the Israelis. The US resolution was not satisfactory to China or to Russia. So let's just bring the comments of Vasily Nebenzia on screen, because this is what he had to say. It's extremely lamentable that for 2 weeks since this crisis erupted, the Security Council has not been able to send a collective signal to de-escalate the situation. The bloodshed is ongoing. The number of civilian casualties is now in the thousands and millions are displaced. I urge a hard think about these shocking figures. He said national and narrow self-centered ideological and political interests prevailed over the aim of stopping a humanitarian disaster. The Russians' main complaint about the US-led draft resolution was that once again, it's requiring or acknowledging or claiming that Israel has a right of self-defense. It's extremely one-sided as far as they're concerned, and they weren't prepared to accept that basically that the draft resolution went far enough with respect to a ceasefire. The Chinese had this to say: we used our veto based on facts, based on law, based on conscience, based on justice. The US text was seriously out of balance and lacked the strongest calls necessary for a full ceasefire. So there is still no agreement within the Security Council on how to move forward because, of course, the United States and Britain are the main barriers to this. As far as I can see, they are not prepared to call for a ceasefire, and that is the problem.
No, because we don't want peace. We don't want to stop people being killed. We want to continue the violence, continue the profits, continue the building of the power base. This is why there's no effort to stop the fighting in Ukraine either. It's obvious what's actually going on in UK and on the international platform.
Vanessa, let's come back to you. And you wanted to comment on the video that we were showing on Monday's program, I think it was, respect to the son of the Hamas founder.
Yeah, well, I mean, what I found very interesting is that interview coincided almost perfectly with Israeli President Isaac Herzog putting out this extraordinary claim that during the attack on the 7th of October, Hamas just happened to drop leaflets showing how to put together chemical weapons. Now, obviously, I am making the comparison with Colin Powell and the weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. But let's see how that combines with, the interview was actually by Alistair Bunkle of Sky News, who also was heavily involved in pushing out the Western propaganda narratives in Syria. And actually, although he says it's difficult to substantiate what Herzog is saying, after all, he's the Israeli president and therefore he should be given credibility. The documents were sent to none other than Hamish de Bretton-Gordon, again, the go-to expert from the UK with connections to MI6, who was used to basically shore up the chemical weapon narratives in Syria. So then we had this interview by Fox News of Mossab Hassan Youssef, the son of founding Hamas leader. Let's have a look at his background. So between 1997 and 2007, This is a 2010 CNN report. He basically worked as one of the most successful spies for Israel. So for 10 years, he was working, providing espionage for Israel, and even resulted in the incarceration of his own father. So what did he actually say in the interview? You were shown a section of that on Monday. He told Fox News' Brian Kilmeade that Israel should explore using gas. I presume that refers to cyanide gas after evacuating civilians in Gaza. He says, it sounds horrible, but I don't see any other option. The tunnels, meaning the armed resistance tunnels, are interconnected, and gas could be one of the solutions. But this has to be in the right time. We cannot just rush into Gaza. Note that he used the term we, which suggests that he's still working or still perceives himself as an ally of Israel. There's no modern army, he says, that is prepared for this type of war. And most importantly, we need to get the civilians out of the picture, which I presume means evacuating them into the Sinai, as that has been demonstrated to be the plan of many of the government officials in Israel. As long as there are civilians there, then the operation might be incomplete, he said. Now, I tweeted this out and I suggested that this could potentially lead to a false flag. We have a very familiar claim that chemical weapons are being used by Al-Qaeda. I find that doubly interesting because Israel is known, it's documented, that they supported, they funded, they armed, and they provided hospital treatment for Al-Qaeda in Syria. And yet here suddenly we have claims that Al-Qaeda did have access to chemical weapon manufacturing ingredients, which has not really been fully admitted before, particularly by Western officials who've been promulgating the Syrian government chemical weapon attack use narrative. So Clayton Morris, formerly of Fox News, now of Redacted, actually spoke to Larry Johnson about the potential for a false flag where potentially gas of any kind could be used against, for example, Gazan civilians and then blamed on Hamas. A few days later, an article came out in Middle East Eye, which again has the headline, Israel-Palestine War. Israel plans to flood Hamas tunnels with nerve gas, source says. So let's see what that source says. Palestinian groups expect Israel to flood Hamas tunnels with a type of nerve gas or chemical weapon under the surveillance of U.S. Delta Force commandos as part of a surprise attack on the Gaza Strip. Israel and the U.S. hope to achieve the element of surprise in order to penetrate Hamas tunnels, rescue an estimated 220 hostages, and kill thousands of soldiers. Now, I do have to mention that there are notifications circulating, particularly on Telegram channels, that 50 civilians among those hostages have been killed by the Israeli bombing on Gaza. And I just want to finish, if there is no false flag in Gaza itself, I would also rather predict that there may well be a false flag in the US, in Germany, in France, or even in the UK that could escalate the conflict and would be blamed, and by an attack, I mean a chemical attack, and that could be blamed on Hamas. Now, that is speculation, but I would like to put it out there as a prediction.
Okay, Vanessa, thank you very much for that. Well, I'm going to jump back to the BBC, and I was extremely interested in this little article that was up sort of 24 hours ago. So the caption was, "My family in Gaza, solo vigil sparks protests." And it's a story about what was going on in a particular location in Israel. I was first of all interested to see who had produced it, because this is quite an emotive report, and I just wanted to know a little bit more about the journalist. So 2 names there were at the bottom. And if I bring in the first one, Giddy Kleiman, this person has been a staff producer at the BBC for 15 years, so they're extremely experienced. Education, the Reichman University, I wasn't familiar with that, so I thought I would just check that one there. And if we bring the university in on screen, this is the first private institution of higher education in Israel. And if I'll leave a bit of the detail on screen, people can freeze it and read it. But the important thing is it says it's unique in its educational methods, which are based on interdisciplinary approach and the teaching of information technology and global markets. It combines theory with real-world experience and provides its students with proficiencies. And one of the big things they're saying is that it's got alumni that come from many, ultimately go on to high-profile jobs and cover many different of areas. So key positions, government agencies, high-tech companies and financial institutions. And my simple point is that this journalist obviously should know a lot about Israel and what's going on and has access to high-profile people. That's my simple point. But when I looked at the second individual, I was intrigued to find this. Now, this is Camera UK, formerly UK Media Watch and BBC Watch. And I'm going to say largely, in my experience, this has been a pro-Israel a group which has been looking at how the BBC reports things. So I was very interested to find the BBC's journalist linked with a critical article by this, which says BBC film on Lod promotes inaccuracies and raises questions. And if we get into it, these are some of the things that Camera UK has picked up. Now, I'm taking these at face value, but my point is that we have other people looking at how the BBC reports, and I'm going to ask some questions at the end. So let's do these points very quickly. Viewers are told that Lod is one of Israel's few mixed cities where Jewish and Arab Israelis live side by side. It then says, the criticism says, in order to come up with that misleading portrayal, the journalist had to ignore other places, including Jerusalem, Haifa, Akko, Ramleh, Yafro, and others. And also it says that the BBC mentioned the women, they're mentioned in the video as mothers of three and residents of Lod, but viewers are not informed that the one lady in particular is a former member of Lod City Council and an activist in the Hadash party and a relative of the Lod resident Musa Hanuza, who was shot dead on the first night of unrest in the city. So we're taking these at face values, but this is very interesting analysis. And okay, that's just highlighting those 2 points that I've covered. Now, if we go and have a look at Hadash here, and we've just chosen something simple, Wikipedia. Hadash is a left-wing party that supports a socialist economy and workers' rights. It emphasizes Jewish-Arab cooperation, and its leaders were amongst the first to support a two-state solution. The top also says that this is a far-left political coalition in Israel formed by the Israeli Communist Party and other leftist groups. So the criticism is that the BBC puts a woman forward without giving you background, which shows that actually she's highly politically active, whether you think that's good or bad. So essentially inaccurate, misleading reporting. But it goes on in the article, they talk about the curfew, which is imposed is just for Arabs. But according to the criticism by Camera UK, the 8 p.m. to 4 a.m. curfew imposed by the police on May the 12th, this is a historical article, did not apply only to Arabs, and yet the BBC allowed that disinformation to stand. And if we just pop on through here, they eventually highlight part of the film clip that's with this article, and it says BBC audiences are not informed that Hadalah is a partisan political NGO with a long record of anti-Israel activity. And the key point here is that the BBC is being disingenuous with both sides of a very highly volatile situation in Israel. And here we've got a pro-Israeli organization criticizing the BBC for the fact the BBC is not telling the truth. And I'm going to ask our audience today, is this just a failure of the BBC, or is the agenda of the BBC to help create the friction and have both sides at each other's throats? Remember that in Syria, BBC Charity, BBC Media Action was happy to state that they worked with opposition leaders in order to help their objective in challenging the president himself. So I'll leave readers with that analysis, but I find it fascinating that a pro-Israeli organization is now saying the same things that we are, which is the BBC is simply not telling the truth.
Okay, let's look at this. This is David Sachs pushing out. Well, this was a Twitter space with Elon Musk. Where is Israel-Hamas war heading? Could this lead to World War III? And this, some of the things that Musk said in this interview were picked up by various media organizations. His fortune, Elon Musk fears the West is foolishly sleepwalking our way into World War III and calls for an immediate ceasefire in Ukraine. This is TASS, so it got to Russia as well. Musk sees the world sleepwalking its way into another world war. So let's just have a look at some of the things he said. A combination of Russia, China, and Iran should be viewed as very strong relative to the West. The potential here isn't a small battle. It's a massive battle where the industrial capacity is of comparable size to the Western alliances. We do not have an overwhelming advantage in industrial might. Unfortunately, our policy has been forcing Russia and Iran to ally with China. It's been forcing them. What choice have we given them? So, first of all, he's recognizing that actually this isn't about sleepwalking into a conflict. This is being engineered. And so while the general public might be sleepwalking in by not pushing back on what our governments are doing, governments are very, very clear. They are using policy decisions to force a reaction from other countries. And inevitably, two major blocks are being created here. And so Russia has the raw materials, China has the industrial capacity, frankly, a perfect match from a war standpoint. So we need to stop doing that. Well, I think this is what we at the UK column been pointing out for a very long time. If we look at what the UK has been doing over the last couple of decades, but recently in the last 10 years in particular, if we think about Integrity Initiative, the absolutely rampant media disinformation about Russia in particular over the last 10 years. And it continues. This is just from today. The Mail banging the war drums again. Putin is trying to form a new axis of terror against the West. Experts fear as Russian despots invite Hamas and Iranian leaders to Moscow. This couldn't possibly be about peace or making some kind of negotiation over hostages. No, this is about creating an axis of evil, which we then are inevitably going to fight a war with. And the media, the government, the think tanks, the NGOs, they are all, it seems, working together to develop a narrative which is going to bring us not sleepwalking into the Third World War. It's going to bring us very rapidly into that, unless the general public decides enough's enough.
Yeah.
Where does that take us?
I think it's back to Vanessa.
Yeah, very quickly. So I'm going to end with two videos. First of all, both these videos are based on the premise that the establishment of the Israeli state, or what I would call the Zionist state, was basically a hit-and-run colonialist project by the British. The history of that is in these two links, if Americans knew, and then also this backup at Mondo Vice, if you want to move on, Mike.
Yep.
So those two articles will give you the very concise history of what went on. Now, the first video is from an intellectual and historian, Shahid Bolson. He has a very controversial past. He has put out a video disputing that controversial past, which is up at his YouTube channel. So let's just roll this and listen. I think he talks a lot of sense.
We should more or less be on the same side, but they keep making you do things that make it impossible for us to side with you. And that's the whole trick, and you keep falling for it. We don't have a problem with Jews. We never did. Muslims don't have a problem with Jews, and history attests to that fact. But the people who do have a problem with Jews are the biggest backers of Zionism, and we do have a problem with Zionism. And you should too, because it's a plot that's against you and not for you. If you think about it, they're tricking you in every which way. The U.S. didn't defeat the Nazis and liberate the concentration camps. Russia did that. Some of the biggest backers of the Nazis were in America. And after the war, they brought over all the top Nazis in Operation Paperclip, and you know it. And right now, they're backing an army in Ukraine who literally fly the swastika, fighting against the country that ended the Holocaust. And you're supporting them. You see how confused you are? Don't you see how they've never changed? How the West has never changed? Don't you see how they want you to be against anyone who ever gave you refuge, anyone who was ever decent to you? And you still think this is support? You still think this is love? You think this is friendship? They're using you and they're ruining you because they never stopped being anti-Semitic. That's the truth. They never stopped being anti-Semitic. So my message to Israelis would be, stop being led by the nose by anti-Semites and actually make peace with the Semites, with the Arabs, with the Muslims, and get yourselves free once and for all from the United States, from Europe, and from Zionist anti-Semitic manipulation, because it's going to be the death of your country. It's going to be the death of your society. And like I said, it's going to be the death of your souls. Because in order for you to do what the United States wants you to do, you have to do things that are against your belief system. You have to do things that are against your morality. You have to do things that are against your own sense of humanity. And it's going to destroy your reputation. And it is destroying your reputation all across the world, and more importantly, across the global South, which is where the future is. So you need to stop being manipulated by the West. You need to stop being manipulated by the United States and stop being manipulated by the people who are taking money from the United States and lining their pockets with it. They're sacrificing your children, they're sacrificing your sons and daughters, they're sacrificing your quality of life, and they're sacrificing your future just to line their pockets. Everybody knows that Netanyahu is doing nothing now but trying to save his political career, no matter how many lives have to be lost, Palestinian lives or Israeli lives. He doesn't care, and neither does America. So you need to wake up and start using that great brain that we all keep hearing about.
I'd just like to, sorry, Vanessa, if I may, I'd like to say that I've listened to all of that clip. So we just had a part of it there and encouraged the audience to listen to all of it. It made me think. The calm delivery I really liked. But of course, he's talking about a nation being led by the nose, but I feel here I am in UK in 2023, and I'm in a nation which is being led by the nose by individuals that I do not feel have got the best interests of this country at heart. And yet what do? They're planning on a global scale, on a Davos scale, in order to change the way this society functions and the US society functions and the way societies function in the European Union. And it doesn't surprise me at all that we would have the same problems in Israel itself, where the government is not necessarily what people think. So I'm just going to say it's worth watching the whole clip and thinking about the country that you live in, wherever you are in the world, because it seems to become increasingly clear that our governments have an agenda between themselves and not in the best interests of people in their own nation states.
And for the people in the chat box that didn't catch the name, it's Shahid Bolson. So sorry, Vanessa, go ahead.
We'll also discuss him a little bit more, maybe an extra. But I think it's worth pointing out that documentation shows that, for example, in the late 1890s, after the inception of Zionism, most Jews and Jewish leaders at that time dismissed Zionism as the latest anti-Semitic cult. Very important. So the last video is Rabbi Yisrael Feldman. You can follow him on Twitter, Torah Judaism, Jews United Against Zionism. This is a relatively short clip, but you can watch the whole thing on Twitter.
The Zionists do not represent the Jewish people and certainly not speak in the name of the Holy Torah. The very name Israel was stolen by them. Authentic Jews around the world demand that the entire land and all rights be restored to the Palestinian people. As Jews, we say that our people will be more safe and our religion more respected under Arabs who believe in God and fear Him than under these heretics, Jews only by birth, who make war against Judaism and humanity. We pray for the speedy and peaceful dismantlement of the State of Israel and for the time when Palestinians and Jews will once again live side by side in peace and harmony.
I think it's just interesting to get that opinion, which is echoed, by the way, by many Jews in America, in Europe, and in the UK. And we're seeing more and more Jews going onto the streets to demonstrate against what their government in Israel is doing.
Yes.
Okay, Vanessa, thank you very much for that. I'll just say back to our audience today that the views that have been put across, we're pleased to put across because we think they're important issues which we need to talk about. We also know that there are individuals who wish to put across comment from an Israel perspective, and that is only right. And within UK Column ourselves, we are covering as much as we can of this tremendously emotive situation. So today is Friday. Monday will be another UK Column News where we'll be looking at other aspects of what's happening. But nobody should be in any doubt that the position of the UK Column is that we want this horrific violence to stop, whether it's in Gaza, whether it's in Israel, whether it's in Ukraine. And we believe that it's going to take a lot of effort by a great many people in many nations to call their own governments to account to stop this violence. And we'll leave you with that thought on this Friday afternoon. But thank you very much for joining us. We'll be back at the same time on Monday.
We'll be back for Extra before
We
that.
will be back for Extra as well. So if you're a subscriber, join us then. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.